Hi, Brittany!
Hey, girl!
Okay, welcome to episode 2.
Oh my gosh.
We've gained quite a following since our first episode.
At least 10 people listened.
I'm so tickled. That doesn't even count you and me.
Right. That in 1 week, that's amazing.
Right.
And look, okay, people who are watching us on YouTube will notice that we now have fancier mics, headphones, some better lighting. I mean, I think we are at least 10% better.
Yeah, I've carved out a little studio space amidst the chaos of my home, and I almost feel like a semi-professional.
Semi.
We're
getting there. So, man, okay, we already gave him a little taste last week, but today you are going to be educating me on the topic today. I have no idea. I don't know anything about this topic. So why don't you let us know what we're going to be talking about today?
So, Brittany, I'm going to take you and our many listeners on a stroll down Sunday School Lane, and we are going to visit our old fuzzy friend, the Flannelgraph.
Oh. I have so many amazing memories from the Flannelgraph. When you brought that up as a top, I mean, even when we were introducing, when I brought this idea to you, it was one of the first things you said. We have to talk about the Flannelgraph.
Yeah. Now, I didn't go to Sunday school regularly as a child. I went, Christmas and Easter pretty much. But I did go to some VBS, some vacation Bible schools.
Yes.
And so I know the Flannelgraph. I've been there. Felt Jesus hanging out on the flannel board.
I remember being a child wanting to be a Sunday school teacher when I grew up. I wanted to do, I remember the Sunday school teacher having the little packet that the little things would come in stick on the Flannelgraph. And I remember being like, oh, I just want that package. I want the curriculum. I want it all. I wanted it.
High tech. It was so high tech. I mean, for a kid growing up in the 70s and 80s, next to when a teacher wheeled in like the reel-to-reel projector on a cart, this was like my favorite.
It was the visual.
Yeah.
You didn't have to just imagine it. You could visualize it.
Right.
You could see Jesus in the blue robe and the sandals.
Yeah. Yeah, right. With all of his disciples following him around and
Yeah.
So let me tell you. Okay. So besides just the Flannelgraph, you know what we're also going to be covering today? We're going to be talking about what?
You said last time we might talk about some Bible stories.
Yes, that's exactly it. So whatever your prissy Pollyanna-ish Sunday school teacher taught you of the Bible stories from Sunday school, this is the uncut version. This is the...
Was that a pun? Was it the cut or uncut version?
Well, do you know what David had to do to earn his first wife? King David?
I do know this story. That was the cut version.
Yeah, that was the cut version. 100 foreskins. He had to bring the king 100 foreskins.
Oh, yeah. God. Can you...
so you were talking about a different Bible. Oh, yeah, I know.
I mean, I vaguely remember. Are we going to talk about that one later?
No.
Okay, that's at another time.
So for those of you who don't know what a Flannelgraph is, it's like a storytelling system that uses a fabric covered backboard. And then the teacher or Sunday school teacher, whatever, would put little flannel backed pieces on it and it would stick. So usually the flannel back pieces would depict Bible characters and props and stuff to help tell the stories. And the fabric used, was typically flannel, hence Flannelgraph, but also felt was very common. So you may have heard of like a felt board, or that's what I remember it being called
board
when I was a child, was the felt board. So, but I learned in all my research on the Flannelgraph, I learned that felt is more expensive than flannel, and hence why the Flannelgraph was far more popular. So,
okay.
So, okay. And another thing we need to clear up is the word Flannelgraph. That actually is just talking about the manipulatable graphics that go on the flannel board teaching system.
Flannel board. The flannel graphs.
Yeah, it's a flannel board storytelling system. Is what it is.
Oh.
And the flannel graph is just the graphic itself. However, it became, nobody wanted to say flannel board storytelling system.
Yes.
And flannel graph just rolls off the tongue a lot more fun, like. So people started calling it flannel graph, and that, right?
Yeah.
That's right. And so people just started calling it the flannel graph, and, kind of like Kleenex, you don't say tissue, paper, whatever.
Yeah.
Facial tissue or whatever.
Facial tissue.
See, I don't even know.
It's what a Kleenex. Hand me a Kleenex.
Right. It's a Kleenex. That's correct. So I did some serious digging to try to find out where the origins of the flannel graph came from. And let me tell you, girl, it is shrouded in mystery.
Okay.
There's a lot of controversy surrounding the origins of the, Oh yeah. There's some warring parties out there. Have you ever heard of a Miss Betty Lukens?
I have not.
Okay, well, people in the Flannelgraph world know all about Betty Lukens. First off, Betty Lukens of Feltboard fame was interviewed by Spectrum magazine, which...
When is this?
It's a publication by the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
Okay. So what time frame are we talking about?
This was in 2016 that Betty Lukens was interviewed for the magazine. Okay. So in her interview, Betty Lukens claims that over 60 years ago, she said, so, 2016 minus 60, that's what, 1956, right? Okay. So she claims that her mother, Marie Lukens, who was a Sunday school teacher, but actually, I guess in Seventh-day Adventist, they call it a Sabbath school teacher, because they don't have church on Sunday. Yeah.
Right.
They have it on Saturday. So her mom, apparently came up to Betty one day and said, I am going to illustrate all the stories of the Bible for Sunday school class. Oh, Sabbath school class.
She was going to draw them, illustrate them herself.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Right. Well, this is what Betty claims. And Betty claims that her mother, Marie, was the creator of the original Flannelgraph idea. However,
she said that Mary illustrated all of the stories. Marie. Get it right.
Right. Marie Lukens.
Illustrated all of these Bible stories for children. Did she create a Flannelgraph board and put her illustrations on flannel and the whole deal?
Yeah. So this is what Betty claimed. Betty Lukens claims that her mother, Marie Lukens, came up with the original concept for the Flannelgraph
in the
back
50s.
in the mid 50s.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then set about to illustrate all the stories of the Bible. So that's what Betty Lukens says. But Betty Lukens, I think, is a lying bag of crap because
that is strong wording.
Yeah.
Well, for Betty.
So, well, listen. So she's claiming her mom came up with it back in 1956 or,
right
around there, mid 50s. But another article I found that's published by the Good News Club, which right? I know these are
Good News Club.
Yeah. So
what is that?
I was hoping you'd ask. So the Good News Club, it is a division of Child Evangelism Fellowship, which is an international. It's an international, interdenominational Christian nonprofit org that was founded back in 1937 to spread the gospel and help provide teaching tips and tools for children, getting the word of God into the hands of babes.
Okay. So, this was established in the 30s, 20 years before Marie. So
that's when
tell me
that's when the Child Evangelism Fellowship was established. That's not when the Flannelgraph was established. No. They claim that a woman by the name of Finley Hodgson, along with students from Calum Wilson University, distributed Child Evangelism Fellowship magazines beginning in 1942 with flannelgraph cutouts in it. So, way back in 1942, magazines were going around with flannelgraph cutouts inside.
Now, why would there be flannelgraph cutouts if there was no flannel board?
Right.
Concept.
Exactly. So it had to have existed prior to 1942.
Okay.
Unlike what Betty Lukens claims about her mom.
Unless Betty's got her time wrong.
Yeah, she is pretty old these days, so maybe she's just senile.
40s. Okay, so 40s and 50s, that's still really old.
Right.
That in the 40s and 50s, you're right. That would have been an amazing concept. Now, do you know if the flannel board was used for anything else, or was it mostly in Sunday school, church, religious environments?
Well, funny you should ask, Britt. So, yes. I mean, originally it was used in ministry and education.
It was?
Yeah.
Because I was wondering,
in military.
In the military, yes. If the military was already using this or organizations were using this, because usually that's how it happens. Organizations, military, somebody invents this thing. The military jumps on because we can use this for war. Right. And then religion jumps in and goes, we could use this for God.
Yes.
Flannelgraph.
That's exactly how that works.
Nuclear bombs.
Right. That's exactly right. So, okay, so here we have Betty Lukens saying her mom Marie made it in the mid-50s.
Okay.
But then we have the Christian or Child Evangelism Fellowship claiming that they're already using it in 1942. However, Britt, this is where it gets really interesting. I was able to dig up a master's thesis written in 1956 titled A Status Study of the Flannelgraph. Yeah. A master's thesis by Mr. Let me see if I can get this name right. It's a very Italian. Mr. Frank D. Giamarino. Mr. Frank D. Giamarino. Frank D. Giamarino. Yeah. So,
so if he was doing a master thesis on this, obviously it was invented way before that.
Yeah. So he's actually
doing a thesis on the flannelgraph. What could he possibly be researching? What was he? Did you read this thesis? Please tell me you read this.
Yeah.
You read this.
I did. I read most of it. It was really so incredibly boring. But I read the part about. Well, let me start by saying he was getting his master's in elementary education. Okay, so
regular old, not Sunday school.
Yeah,
just
regular old.
Okay.
He's at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, and he's getting his master's in elementary education.
Okay.
Frankie D. doing his master's thesis on the flannelgraph, and what he writes, what he tells about the history of the flannelgraph totally doesn't settle with what Betty Lukens or the Child Evangelism Fellowship have to say.
Neither one of them. Okay, right. What does Frankie D say?
Okay, well, I've got some direct quotes. Listen to this. Okay. As far as can be ascertained, says Frankie D, fathers, grandfathers, and great-grandfathers, if they went to Sunday school, knew about the flannelgraph technique of visual storytelling. So, in 1956, fathers, grandfathers, and great-grandfathers knew about it. So, you're going back 3 additional generations. Let's say Frankie D is getting his master's and he's 25. So, we're going back into the mid-1800s? Let's add 20 years, okay, for every generation. So that's 60 years earlier than 1956.
Okay.
Something all like right. That. Even long. Okay, so anyway, late 1800s. Probably. That's so.
So my question is, when was flannel even invented?
Oh my gosh. I cannot believe you asked me that. As I was searching for the history of the flannelgraph, everything that kept coming up was the history of flannel itself. And I kept skipping over that. I didn't actually do much research into that.
It says the origins of flannel can be traced back to the late 17th century Wales, although modern day flannel was not invented until 1889.
Okay. All right.
So we had some flannel.
Felt was invented way back then too. And I think I read something about it being from like Scotland or something. But Wales and Scotland are pretty close together. Yeah.
That a flannel board could have been used in the 1800s. All the way back then.
Yeah. Somebody was doing laundry, noticed the static cling, and was like, hey, I've got an idea.
And then to use it in Sunday school. Grandfathers and great-grandfathers.
Right. As far as can be ascertained is what Frankie D says.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, who did he cite for this source? Yeah, no one. No citation whatsoever for that claim.
this guy granted a degree? That is
Right.
not a proper thesis.
Okay, well, he goes on. You're not,
Okay.
you're getting a little antsy. You've obviously completed a lot of graduate studies.
I know my research.
You're like, I did a freaking dissertation. It took forever. You have to cite everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can't just ascertain out of your ass.
Right. Well,
you have to cite some resources. Okay.
Right. Well,
moving on.
Frank didn't. And
Frankie D.
Yeah, exactly.
He just asked his own grandfather and great-grandfather.
Right, he's like,
"Did you know about Flannelgraph? I'm going to stick that in my
they
thesis."
used a Flannelgraph. So, as far as I can ascertain, that's how it came
From
to be.
all of my huge pool of research participants.
That's right.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Okay. So, he goes on to say in this master's thesis that the early missionaries were probably the first to employ the idea for the flannelgraph. Probably. And guess what source he cited for that?
I'm guessing not another.
No
There's
source.
No source at all.
Cited. No.
Probably.
Early missionaries probably were the first to employ this idea.
Okay.
So,
and who were early missionaries? I mean,
well, Jesus Christ himself
was an early missionary.
Yeah, and in the year 33 AD, he gave the Great Commission and said, "Go out and make disciples of all nations." So I guess Paul maybe would have been out in Corinth,
the earliest missionary.
Jesus up, yeah. He was like, "Listen up, Corinthians, Philippians, all of you." Listen, all of you Southern Europeans, and look at this. I'm going to use my felt cutouts and teach you the good news of Jesus. Probably, as far as I can ascertain.
Wow, Frankie.
Yeah, the highly educated educator. Yeah.
Yeah, this
giving
guy.
us all that good information.
Guy teaching your kids.
Yeah. Well, the next source he did cite.
Okay.
So he did cite that about the flannelgraph gaining impetus around World War I, when it was used in the field with the military.
Okay.
They would hang up a general. What's it called?
I have no idea. What are you looking for?
GI. Well, GI stands for a shit ton of different things, but general inventory, general whatever. So back in World War I, the military would use these out in the field to train soldiers. They would hang up just one of their military blankets.
Oh my gosh.
And I don't know if you've ever seen those military blankets, but they're all kind of nappy and fuzzy and woolly. And
yeah. Okay, so World War I is what? Early 1900s?
1917. Yeah, 1914, 1917 is, I think.
Yeah, ish.
Gosh, let's pretend that I know anything about history.
We are not historians.
I'm pretty sure that's right. 1914. That sounds right. 1914 to 1917.
Okay.
I don't know. Or I know 1917 is part of it because I've seen the movie 1917.
Okay.
And it's about World War I.
Okay. I know nothing about history. And then the CEF, they didn't have the goods on this either. So this was used way
what
before.
The CEF did have is they did have some photo evidence of the missionaries that they'd sent their magazines to, missionaries in India using flannelgraph in India with children. But those photos were from the 50s as well. Okay. So even though they claimed to be using it in 1942,
they may have been the first ones to use it in the church.
Sure.
Although Frankie D says early missionaries were
Right.
using it
Right.
way back when. All right.
Right. He's talking
That
Silas.
is fascinating.
And now, do you want to take a guess how many manufacturers still make flannel boards and flannel board cutouts to this day?
They're still, oh yeah, they have
Oh, yeah,
to
they're
still
still
be
in
made.
production. Oh, yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I would say how many companies?
Yeah.
What was the question?
How many manufacturers are still making flannel boards to this day?
5.
More. Actually, I have no idea. I didn't look up. But when I did look it up, there were like dozens. There were so many.
So many people making
manufacturers making flannel boards still.
Well, that makes sense to me. So our listeners don't know this, but I used to be in a Christian band and we toured all over the country playing worship music at different churches.
Oh, wow.
And some of these churches were very small town, maybe 5 to 10 members. They would still at the front of the church have that little slide in. This is the attendance from last week. 8.
Oh my gosh.
This was our tithe, $56.
$14.95. Yeah.
No audio, visual, anything. So I can imagine that the flannel board would still be helpful there. Yeah.
Wow.
They're doing their best, man. Spreading the story of Jesus to the children.
Spread the good word.
Yeah.
So,
well,
I was looking
very informative
at these websites, and I was trying to get an idea how much these systems cost, and they ain't cheap, my friend. They ain't cheap at all.
I would say for this system, you get a flannel board and how many Bible stories?
Well, it varies greatly from manufacturer to manufacturer. I really just pulled prices from 2. One of them was Betty Lucan's.
Oh, wait. Betty Lucan has her own system?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
She's like a major producer of feltboard systems.
Okay. And she may be the only one in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, which would give her that primary.
A huge advantage. Yeah.
Right, in that field. So I'm going to say the starting cost is $150 for the board, and you may get one set. You can add on New Testament. That's going to be an additional fee. You can add on Old Testament. But there's a lot more stories in the Old Testament.
Right.
That's going to be at least $1,000. Wow.
Well, you over-exaggerated that cost quite a bit.
Okay. You mean cutout characters made of felt aren't that expensive? I overshot that a bit. Okay.
Like last week when you were asking me how much the Strong Team made in a year, and I'm like, 33,000. And you're like, 11 million, you dumbass.
Okay. All right. We're bad at estimations.
Right.
All right.
Okay, so Betty Lucan's actually has a pretty decent deal. You can get what she calls her like deluxe Bible set, which is like 182 Bible stories, and it's got 600 felt pieces, which includes characters and props and scenery and stuff. And that sells for $380.
Now, does that include a
380.
board?
That includes a board and a small easel and
Okay.
12 foot, good Lord, 12-inch tall figures. You can get a smaller set with 6-inch figures, but this is for like the deluxe pro set.
This is for maybe the elderly crowd who needs it in large print.
Right. Or if you're teaching like the Sermon on the Mount or something, and you're sitting there teaching 5,000 people, and so they have to be able to see from far away, and you need the 12-inch Moses.
I mean, Jesus was the first missionary, so apparently he had this. The 12-inch flannel figures.
Right. We won't talk about what else he has that's 12 inches. Okay.
You cannot talk about Jesus's penis. That
Kristen, I can talk about whatever.
Kristen, Jesus did not have a penis.
Ken doll doesn't have a penis, but
Jesus
did certainly had a. Yes, he had a penis.
It is sacrilegious to talk about Jesus, the penis of our Lord.
Well, how do you think he peed?
Do you think Jesus he just masturbated?
Probably. But maybe he did it without lustful thoughts.
See, okay, this is a little side trail that we're taking here. But I think if we're going to make Flannelgraph figures and stories, we need to make them realistic.
You mean with their dongs hanging out?
Jesus goes off alone to
he did the that mountain.
A lot. I know. I'm like, you're telling me that Jesus didn't have he didn't have a sex drive?
Of course he did. Of course he absolutely did.
Oh.
Because he experienced every kind of temptation that man does. So of course he had a sex drive.
Oh.
He just didn't sin.
Which means he never masturbated.
Is masturbation a sin? Does it say so in the Bible?
A lot of people think it is. I don't think it is.
Right.
I think it's part of healthy sexuality.
Right.
But that is taboo.
But we don't want to think of Jesus as a sexual being.
No.
Right.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. So it could be that Jesus never did masturbate.
That's true.
Maybe,
if
he didn't have any sexual urges.
He could have been asexual.
Yeah.
Maybe so. But then he wouldn't be able to relate to us.
Right.
So.
Right. He would have had to have been tempted sexually.
I think he was a sexual being.
Yeah. I think so too.
Well, we solved that.
Okay. All right. Well, okay, so back to the Flannelgraph. So really, I kind of touched on like everything I could find on the Flannelgraph. It's pretty sparse out there in internet land.
That's it.
About what's available regarding the Flannelgraph. But I did find this very interesting. There is a pastor named Tim Madden, and he is pastor of a church called Cornerstone Bible Church in Browndale, Pennsylvania. And he had this blog, and he was talking about Flannelgraph Theology.
Oh.
And, yeah. He was saying how Flannelgraph Theology is like actually a doctrinal error of teaching the Bible.
You've got a whiner.
So, can you hear that?
Yeah.
No, can you hear my dog?
Yeah, I can hear your dog whining.
Fuck. Let me open the door.
In. Yeah. God, baby. Baby.
You big whiner. He hates being away from me.
Oh, the baby. Okay.
Oh, God. All right. Okay. So, actually, he's probably just going to whine at me right now, too. It's probably not a good idea. Okay, get out of here. He wants a snack, is what he wants. He's like, it's way past snack time, and you haven't provided me with a snack. Okay. So, anyway, Flannelgraph Theology apparently is this, like, doctrinal error of teaching the Bible in that it supposedly is focusing too much on like the figures of the Bible stories, like Moses and Jonah and, you know, whoever, Job, Esther, whatever, and not pointing towards Jesus.
Oh, right. So in the story of the ark, there should be Jesus somewhere in that story. And here comes
or at least
Jesus.
Pointing more towards God.
Jesus
as
shuts
the
the door.
Hero.
God.
Right.
God shut the door and then killed all of the people. We should be focusing more on the action of God in that story instead of the action of Noah.
That's exactly what Tim Madden has to say about that.
Well, I think that would have been an amazing story for the Flannelgraph. If we just have a big figure of God who comes in and just pours water down and all the people drown, there's just dead bodies floating around the Flannelgraph. That would have been amazing.
Dead bodies.
Great idea, Pastor Madden.
So, yeah. So that's what I got. That's it for the Flannelgraph.
Well done. That was very informative and very exciting, I must say. I love the Flannelgraph. It brought back really good memories. You know, I was raised in the church, but not all of it was bad. And that was a good memory that I had. Was a lot of fun sitting around on the floor, eating animal crackers, watching the teacher tell stories of the Flannelgraph. That's a really good little memory. So thanks for that.
You're welcome.
And now we are introducing a new segment to our podcast that we are calling
Story Time with Kristen. So let's talk a little about Elisha. Now, do you know who the prophet Elisha is? Not Elijah.
Yeah. There's an Elijah and there's an Elisha.
That's correct.
Okay. Listen, it's been years since I've even opened a Bible, so...
Yeah, I'm trying to remember who that
girl.
was. Okay.
Elisha. All right.
So, Elisha, he was the successor to Elijah, the prophet.
Okay.
So, this all happens back in the book of 2 Kings. And at the end of 2 Kings, or at the beginning of 2 Kings chapter 2, Elijah is swooped up into heaven, and Elisha, his intern, takes over. Okay? And he becomes
Elijah just disappears and is, quote, taken to heaven, end
He's
quote.
Sucked up without ever dying. He's sucked straight into heaven. Like on a chariot of fire, they say. So.
Right. Which means somebody probably killed him and buried his body out in the desert. But we're going to say here.
Well, Elisha
he
was supposedly witnessed this.
Taken to heaven.
So.
And then he took over. Took his job. Right. Okay. So I don't know what happened. But I'm a new guy now.
We can't find him anywhere, so he must have just got sucked right up into heaven.
I saw it. And I witnessed the chariot of fire.
And now I'm your guy.
And now you're going to give me your money instead of him for all of the prophecies I am about to foretell.
That's right. And everywhere I go, I'll get to stay in the 5-star hotels. And you people are
Wow.
going to be putting me up and fixing me fancy meals.
Okay, so
So
Elisha is the new guy.
Elisha is the new prophet. Okay,
Alrighty.
so like the first thing he does as the new prophet of Israel is
Mm-hmm.
he is in Jericho, and the men of Jericho come up to him and they're like, "Hey, Elisha, we love this land. It's beautiful. It's lovely. It's great. However, our water is stanky. It's some stank, nasty water, and
Okay.
we can't grow anything here because of it. The water is
Mm.
awful." So Elisha's like, "I'm gonna fix this for you." So
Maybe
what he
because
does,
there's dead bodies in the water.
right? I wonder why it's so stank nasty,
Mm.
because Elisha is down there bloating up
Maybe.
at the bottom of the sea.
Hmm.
So, yeah,
We're not
maybe
going to tell
so.
anybody that. I know how to fix it, though.
Oh, the chariot went up, the chariot of fire, but then it crashed into the lake. So, right. So,
Mm-hmm. Stinky water.
stanky water. So, Elisha, he took like a handful of salt and he threw it into the water,
Hmm.
and the water was miraculously healed. Healed, they say.
Wow.
The water was healed and remains clean to this day.
Because of the salt.
Because of the salt. So he had just performed his first great miracle as the head prophet of Israel. Okay, so he's coming off of that high, and then he leaves Jericho. He goes on to Bethel, and as he's walking through Bethel, like a group of kids come out and they start making fun of him. And apparently, yeah,
Oh, I like this story.
yeah. So Elisha apparently is very self-conscious about his balding head.
Yes.
And these kids,
So the kids are making fun of his bald head.
yeah, they're like, "Hey, Baldy, get the hell out of town. Cue ball, fuck off." And Elisha, he's not having any of it. He is pissed. He is pissed. So he curses these kids. And
Which any good prophet would do.
right, any
Curse the
prophet
children of the neighborhood.
that just, takes over from this big wig. I mean, because Elisha was a big frickin' wig of the prophets. He did some super miraculous things.
Yes.
And then here comes Elisha, and all he does is clear up a pond, right, with some salt.
I mean,
right.
He took the dead body out of the pond that he had thrown in there, buried it out in the desert, and threw some when nobody was looking, and then came back and was like, "Hey, now I'm going to cleanse it, throw some salt into it," and suddenly it's amazing. It's no longer contaminated.
So that is one
Miracles.
way it could have happened. Faux show.
Okay. So this guy curses some kids who are making fun of him because he's bald.
An
ego problem.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So, it doesn't say he couldn't grow facial hair. I don't know why he's whining. But anyway, he did not like that one little bit. And so he curses them, and he calls out 2 mother bears to come out from the nearby woods. And the bears maul the children. They maul 42 children. Thank you, Elisha. The end.
Wow. What? What the actual fuck? This guy had an ego problem, calls out some bears out of the forest to kill 42 children.
Yeah.
Who were making fun of him.
Right. Never mind that's what freaking kids do. Kids tease.
Now, in the Bible, is this guy seen as a figure that is to be respected? Is this something that is seen as a good action? Like, wow, that's a miracle. That's amazing.
Like,
Wow,
well,
the power
thing
of
is,
God. He could
the
call
Bible
bears.
doesn't even say. It just says, and then he went
It just
off.
happened? It
Yeah.
just happened.
It's like, oh, and so 42 children got mauled by a bear, and then Elisha went on. The end. That's like legitimately the end of the story.
Okay.
So,
moral of the story.
Don't tease the prophet of Israel. Especially after he's murdered his
predecessor.
He's murdered his mentor and thrown him in the lake. Right.
Wow. Well, that was story time with Kristen.
You're welcome.
That's one that I never saw in the Flannelgraph, I'll tell you that. If I had, I certainly would never have made fun of a bald man.
Right.
I mean, that scare boys some and kids girls straight. Yeah. Yes. Quit being little dicks, making fun of people, making fun of the adults.
Right.
Or else you're going to be mauled.
Right. By big, scary monsters that come out of nowhere to devour you. Yeah.
More of the story.
Right.
Well, thanks, Kristen.
Okay.
So next week, Kristen, we are going to be talking about the Satanic Panic.
Oh my gosh, Britt, I remember this. I remember this. Back in the 80s, like the mid-80s? Is this what we're talking about? Oh, yes. Okay, this is going to be good.
It's not the only time that there has been Satanic Panic, but this is one of the times.
Right.
So we will be talking about this next week. And maybe more story time with Kristen. Bye-bye, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Bye. See you next week.
And we're out. Okay.